Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and welcome to part 2 of how to create a very simple texture for a crate. In the last tutorial, we exported UVs and played a little bit with Photoshop. This one, we are actually going to create more realistic textures using photos and images from real life. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go back into Photoshop. Let's have some fun. Earlier, I have downloaded a wood plank. So this is the wood plank right here. And what I wanted you to do is use this wood plank and place it into this UV shell. So I'm going to grab this and drag it into Photoshop. So again, I'm using this selection tool. I'm going to grab this, click and drag, get a good selection, Control C for copy. The long way is edit, copy. Go over here, Control V is the shortcut, edit, paste is the long way. And you'll notice that this texture is gigantic and doesn't fit at all in our scene. Well, that's actually a good thing. Having a large texture is very important because the last thing we want to have is a small texture and then try to fit it. It will lose the quality. This will actually have really high quality. So therefore, if I scale it, then it will fit and give me really nice quality textures. So I'm going to do a Control T, which is free transform. Hold down Shift. If you're using new Photoshop, like I think I'm using Creative Suite 2018. If you guys use anything above that, you don't have to hold down Shift, but I have to hold down Shift to keep the uniform available. So hold down Shift to keep the aspect ratio correct. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. And I might as well just place it here. I'm going to be using my UVs as a reference, because I know that this is one face and this is the front of the cube. So once I have that, press enter. I'm going to hit Z, which is zoom, or you can click on the zoom right here and just close in. And by the way, I'm really big about shortcuts, so you're going to hear me do a lot of shortcuts. All right, I'm going to do a Control J, which basically duplicates this. Control J. It just makes things go faster, and the faster you are, the more you can produce, which companies love. So I have this. I'm going to drag this over here to the left. And I'm going to show you a trick. Control T again, which is the free transform. Right click on it and do flip horizontal and then flip vertical. And then that way you can get a little bit less of that mirrored image. But at least this is now outside of the UV space. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And then I'm going to scoot this so that maybe I can get that line right there. Maybe I might crush it just a little bit so I can get that edge right there. I'm trying to get that edge without losing anything. Cool. Something like that. All right. Now remember, this is over here. We're not going to see it. I'm going to take my layer, my two layers that I just made, and do a Control E, which will merge them together. This is going to be my wood plank. So double click on layer 3 and call it a wood planks. So now that I have that, I can do a Control J again. Can move this over here. Control J again. Maybe scoot this a little bit so I get a little bit of a gap there. Control J. Drag it over here. This is a good opportunity to grab one of these and do a Control T and maybe just flip vertically and then horizontal. So you're going to notice very quickly that we have what's called repeating textures. It is very clear and obvious that these textures are the same, being repeated. And boy, are humans really good at recognizing repetition. So this is something that we're going to have to fix later. But right now, I'm just trying to get these planks of wood situated. So again, select a layer, Control J. Move it up. Control J again. Gonna lose my icons, but that's okay. This frowny face is kind of weirding me out. So I'm going to delete this layer that had all those funny little textures. They were just there for fun. And it's looking really good, but I'm getting a little slightly confused. And part of it is because I can't see my UVs anymore. So the UVs are right here and I can't see them. So what I want to do is create a border that's going to help me outline where is the texture not going to work. So it's, again, anything outside of this is kind of like a waste of data. So you also want to kind of fill it with a dark color or some sort of color so that you don't lose any type of pixel information. So I've got my UV selected. I'm going to go over here, grab my magic wand. I'm going to select the empty space on the left side and the empty space on the right side. Again, this is under the UV snap layer. Then I'm going to go to select, modify, and I'm going to contract by 10 pixels. So what that does is gives me a little bit of wiggle room. I'm going to create a new layer. And this time I'm going to do a shift backspace, which is fill. And instead of foreground, I'm going to choose 50% gray and fill. This is going to be what's called my border. What's nice about this border is that it shows me that the UVs are about 10 pixels away from that. And it also shows me that there's a little bit of wiggle room around here. But in general, this will also keep the data, the information over here pretty flat. It just makes things look a little bit more organized and clean. Go ahead and save. I'm going to Control S. Again, the long way is File Save. And let's go back into Maya. You can see the connections here, color. There's a little connection here. Click on that and then click on Reload. And there we go. We are starting to get our basic texture. Now that we have the basics down, let's go ahead and make this a little bit more interesting by adding extra details to it. All right, let's hop into Photoshop. So I'm going to select all of these and do a Control E, which is going to merge them all together into one piece. Now this is considered destructive. There's nothing else I can do with them, so just keep that in mind. Moving forward, I won't be able to alter it too much. Okay, so we're going to zoom in. I'm going to use my Band-Aid here, which is called the Spot Healing Brush. And what I can do with this, and using brackets to decrease and increase my brush, what I can do is start trying to remove some of these elements. This dark area of the texture really stands out. So it's a good opportunity to go in and just try to paint that out. You'll notice that there's a couple of other ones that have similar textures, so I might want to get rid of those. And again, it's just about kind of trying to get rid of some of the flaws from that's really obvious that it's repeating. So for example, we probably want to get rid of this, anything that really stands out. Now, just have to be careful. You don't want to go too extreme, but let's go ahead and try to remove some of these things. It's important to make these things look unique because the human eye can see a pattern a mile away. So you just want to make sure that you get rid of some of these repeating textures so at least it looks different and unique. And that's really important. So especially down here, we definitely don't want these two together because they're so close. All right, I'm going to keep going just a little bit more. So that's the healing brush. The next thing would be to try to make this a little bit more unique. I'm going to fill this one more thing. I'm going to create a new layer and it's kind of distracting. So I'm going to grab this beige and just fill a new layer just to kind of, whoops, shift backspace. Make sure you choose foreground, click OK, just to fill it in with some sort of color because it's really throwing me off how that there's no wood outside of it and it's black. I'd rather have some sort of color in case there is some sort of leak or I missed a spot. It won't be black, at least it'll be this kind of wooded color. All right, so now what we can do is start creating a little texture. So I'm going to do something like a dark red, something kind of scary looking-ish color. And let's grab a text tool over here in Maya. And I'm going to choose something that maybe looks dramatic and fun. Let's say like Cooper Black. And I'm going to write fragile. Notice that the color didn't pick. That's okay. I can click up here. Choose this little swatch right here. Control A, which is select all, or you can just click and drag. Again, try that again. Clink, clink. There we go. So we now have fragile. I'm going to make this larger. Again, keep an eye on those UVs. That UV is really important. And I'm going to take fragile here, kind of make it go sideways. It doesn't have to be perfect. I don't want it to be 45 degrees exactly. And it doesn't have to be perfectly aligned in the center because, you know, you got to think about where these things are coming from. Are they being built to be beautiful and perfect? No, this is a wooden crate that's beaten up and they're just putting a stamp on it. All right, so now that we have this, we want to maybe have some fun with it because it's a little too clean. Let's right click on Fragile and say rasterize image. That means that it's no longer a text, it is now an image, which I can manipulate. All right, let's get a little closer here. To kind of wear it down a little bit, I am going to choose over here. We have dodge, which we can go and lighten some areas. If you want, we can burn, which means it'll darken some areas. So this is going to cause it to have a little bit of that color variance. And what's nice is that we also have sponge. Sponge desaturates. And we definitely want to use, whoops, did not grab this right sponge. Sponge desaturates. So what that means is that we don't need everything to be the same color. It can be a little bit grayer. Now, if you're interested in adding more colors than those, you can always make a selection. So hold down Control and click on this little icon on your layer. Click. And that's going to give you a selection, which is really helpful because now I can take a brush. I can grab kind of like a crazy looking brush. And I can choose maybe something a little bit more saturated, a little bit maybe a little brownish. And I can decrease my opacity because I don't want it to be too crazy. And I can kind of add a little bit of that grunge. So it's going to look a little dirty. Right? So instead of having that solid color, we now have something that looks a little dirty. Now, you can do the same thing here. You can actually go in and add some dirt into your box, but you know, this is a little painterly. It looks a little bit not realistic, so just kind of be sporadic about it. You don't want to cause it to look like it's repeating, but you can go ahead and like make a corner or something that looks like it got a little dirty. It doesn't hurt. Okay, going back to Fragile. Another thing that I can do is erase some of these things away. Now, I'm a little hesitant about using an eraser tool to actually erase something. Instead, I'm going to be using a mask. So mask is really nice because I get the opportunity to make changes without destroying any of my text. So over here to the right at the bottom of layers, there's this thing called mask. I have Fragile selected. I'm going to click on that. And basically this mask says anything white you can see, anything black you can't see. So I'm going to grab a brush. I've got this crazy texture. I've got it in black. And now I can paint it away. And it's going to, and my opacity right now is at 51%. Going to crank it up to 100. And you can see that it's almost like erasing. But the cool thing about this is that if I go back to white, I can bring it back. So this is a non-destructive way of working with Photoshop, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of make some changes. Again, I'm going to reduce my opacity because maybe in some areas I want it to look like it got, you know, a little taken, not too rough. It's a little rough, but not too rough. You can make it really kind of just like some areas can just be. So there we go. We're getting something really interesting to look at, very unique. And looks like it's part of this dirty, rusty object. So one last step, I'm going to go back into my color map here. There's a normal mode. And I can choose darken and then hold down I can try multiply. And this kind of adds to the object. So maybe multiply is a good one. You guys can kind of play around. Just kind of go, I'm clicking down my down arrow in my keyboard, by the way, so just letting you know, just to look at different modes. I think right now multiply is the best one, so I'm going to keep that. Let's see. Now that I have that, I can actually do a Control J. Again, this is going to duplicate this. I can move this down, rotate it, put Fragile here. If you want, again, press Enter when you're done. You can make a selection and I can paint in some of my reds that I might have lost along the way. So if I want to, I can go ahead and go back to some reds. Maybe bring some of that back, just kind of make it a little bit more unique. If I want to, I can go back to my fragile. Go back to my white and bring some of this back. Go to black and maybe change a couple of other things. So again, it's all about making it unique and different. All right, go ahead and Control J that as well. Gonna move this down, maybe make this one a little straighter. And let's save. And I'm gonna go here, click on this little output, click reload, and now we're getting a crate. Really cool looking crate. Now again, you can see that there's these patterns over and over, which drive me nuts. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit more painting, but I'm starting to get something very unique. All right, cool. Definitely looks a lot better than what it was. All right, let me grab my match the tool. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of some of these. Again, this is going to the wood planks. I'm trying to get rid of them because it's really obvious. It's okay to keep one or maybe even two, but you just have to be really careful because it's very obvious that it's a repeating texture. So I challenged you to go ahead and continue on this. You can add icons, for example. So if you're interested in creating like a biohazard, I found an icon on the internet for biohazard. You can bring that in. Again, this is kind of like a sticker, so I'm going to reverse it. Create a mask. It's a little too clean right now, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my paintbrush, maybe use something else. There's a lot of brushes in Photoshop that will give you an interesting look, so feel free to kind of play around. Maybe I'll grab this brush. Again, make sure this is here. I'm going to reduce my opacity so it's not so obvious and just kind of make it disappear a little bit at a time. This is probably a little too strong, but that will give me a little bit. I can bring some of this back. So I'm going to kind of eat up at the edge over here, over there, just kind of maybe a little bit in the center just so it's not so perfect. And of course I can use white to bring some of it back. So if I think biohazard just got a little too gone, or some things don't look exactly right, I can always try to bring that back. So it's a little bit of a painterly process. It's kind of fun. So have a little fun with it. You can always go in here and again take a look. Maybe darken is a good fit. Maybe multiply is a good fit. Color burn could be really nice. So I always recommend that you take a look at different types of textures. And I think I'm going to go to multiply. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for that. And if you want, you can always kind of dirty this up again. So again, I can grab this sponge and just kind of desaturate some areas, which is always kind of interesting to kind of remove some of the color. You can always dodge, which is lighten some areas. And you can always burn, which will darken areas. So it just kind of breaks up the texture a little bit. Not everything has to look so even. And it's just kind of fun. So let's go ahead and save that. Hop back into Maya. Reload. There you go. Definitely don't want to touch that. Okay. Once you're done with your textures, let's go over how to clean this up. I'm going to go to my UVs and I'm just going to hide my UV snap. This is actually very important because a lot of people forget to turn those off, and you can see all of the UVs in your textures, which doesn't look good. It's a really big noob mistake, so make sure, or a new artist mistake, so make sure you turn those off. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to hit save just because it's important to save it. And now I'm ready to save this as an image. Now, right now, this file is about 3.34 megabytes big, which is actually a pretty decent size. So let's go to File, Save As, and I'm going to go to my crate and I'm going to go to my source images. This is where your final images should be. And I'm also going to choose TIFF and then turn off layers. So that means that this is going to be a flattened image. It's not going to have all those layers. It's not going to have all that paint information. It's just literally going to be a flat image. I also want to choose TIFF because it's a high quality and it doesn't compress. So don't choose JPEG because JPEG will definitely compress your files. Choose TIFF. If you're in gaming, choose Targa. And if you're in visual effects, you can choose PNGs. But TIFFs are also a really good file that works great. So very little compression. Let's go ahead and hit save. Make sure this is none. Discard layers, perfect. Click OK. So if I go into Crate and I go into source images, you're going to notice that this one is about 3 megabytes. And that doesn't sound like that much of a difference. You want to make sure your file size is perfect. No extra information. It literally is just the final file. So I'm going to take my object, go to color, click on this little guy, click on my folder, go to source images, and go to Crate color. So it doesn't look like much has happened, but it's basically a lot more efficient. So we're going to create a floor. I'm going to duplicate this and just kind of show off all the hard work that you've done. Let's take a look. Maybe I'll bring this over here. Nothing is lined flat and straight. Nothing screams like CG than something straight. So make sure you kind of rotate this a little bit. Duplicate it. Weep. Let's go to the channel box. Let's rotate this. Let's move this over here. Let's change this to 0. Though I find it kind of funny. Gonna zero this out. There we go. And let's place it on here. Let's go ahead and do it this way. Definitely looks dangerous. Okay, so how do we render this? Well, usually up here at the top, we go to Arnold and we go to Render. And you'll notice that it's dark. That's because Arnold needs a light. We're going to go to Arnold Lights, and there's something called Physical Sky. This is going to create a dome, let me zoom out, around your object, which is emitting light, which is going to be really nice because we want light to come on all directions. I'm going to move this a little bit more centered, and then I'm going to go to Arnold and Render, and then we have our crate. This is a good place to notice that my crates are in fact floating, and they also look like glass, so we're going to have to fix that in a second. But go ahead and select these guys and bring them down until they're close to the floor. The nice thing about Arnold is that it will show you live how it looks like. Now, I don't want it to be penetrating the floor, okay? Don't put it under the floor. You want to make sure that it's actually just sitting just slightly above the floor. I'm going to grab all of these things, all objects, and then I'm going to delete the history and freeze the transformation. So in case I accidentally lose this, it gets rotated and woo, it gets hidden. I can always, and maybe scaled, I'll just scale this just to show you. Somehow, and by the way, this has happened to me before. If I convert this all into 0, the translate and the rotate, and then change this scale to all of these scales to 1, it will go back into place. So that's the reason why we freeze the transformations. I'm going to go to show here and turn off the lights, and then I can render, and you'll notice that the light is still there, so it doesn't affect it. Okay, so what do we do with this? It's super reflective. It's kind of looks like our box, which is supposed to be gross and ugly or dirty, is now, well, kind of glossy. So let's take a look at our shader. Control A, take a look at our crate shader, and this time it's our specularity. Our specularity right now is pretty nice. So we want to reduce the weight, and let me show you what that looks like, so that it's not as shiny. However, the big one is called roughness. So right now, this is not looking very rough. But in real life, we all know that wood is actually very rough to touch, and therefore the light scatters, and therefore it doesn't really look glossy like a cue ball, which is like nice and smooth. So this roughness is what's going to help us make things look a little less shiny. So increase the roughness, and there we go. We have a crate. Might bring the roughness down just a little bit. We don't need too much. There we go. Let's go ahead and I'm going to press stop. I'm going to click on this little guy right here, which is the resolution gate. And I'm going to place my object like this to show it at its best view. This is exactly what the render is going to look like. So if I cut it off right here and then I press play, it's exactly where it's going to cut off. So it's a great view to see it. Again, this is called the resolution gate. And hit play. I'm going to let it render. You can see that it's rendering right here on the bottom left. It's chugging along. You can see the biohazard. You can see all these really nice details. Oh, it only took 15 seconds. Perfect. And to save, we're going to go to Save Image. And notice where it saves it. It always saves it in images. So that's something to take note of, that whenever you want to export something, it's in images. So type in create_render dot spell out JPEG, because you can spell TIFF. This is just something that I can do on my portfolio. If you want high quality, you can choose TIFF and stuff like that. But JPEG is perfect for, online or something simple. Click save, and let's take a look at our render. Gonna go to images, and there it is. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you found this really interesting and productive. I know that it can be a little bit of a challenge, but again, this is an introduction to texturing. That is basically how things work in Maya. You UV map something, you bring it into Photoshop or a 2D software, and then you create your own unique texture. So that is the basics. So hopefully you found that interesting. Now, the next challenge is going to be what happens when we duplicate this object. And let's say our supervisor is like, hey, I really want this to be a long crate. And you'll notice what starts to happen, right? This is called stretch textures. So we would have to create UV sets for particular objects, and that's another tutorial. But hopefully you found this helpful. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because that's distracting, but hopefully you understand the fundamentals of texturing. Let me know if you guys have any questions by leaving a comment below. And of course, please subscribe to my channel and like and share if you found this helpful. If you have time, please stop by academicphoenixplus.com, where you will find free tutorials, free ebooks, free downloads, and so much more. So take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. It's got a lot of free resources for you. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time in the next tutorial.